On January 24, 2013, Defense Secretary Leon E. Panetta announced from the Pentagon that the 1944 ban placed on women serving in direct combat divisions of the U.S. military would be lifted. He stated that, by opening up more opportunities for people to serve in uniform, we are making our military stronger, and we are making America stronger. That's a beautiful sentiment. Social equality is a Central American ideal, so naturally Panetta's statement rang true to most Americans, but we overlook the real nature of the issue at hand. The military is not a religious or educational institution. It's not a limestone monument dedicated to the ideals and freedoms of America. It's the living, breathing, fighting force that protects those ideals. And if we wish it to remain as such, we can't compromise it. That's not to say that women do not deserve a place fighting valiantly as they have for decades. That's not to discount the more than 280,000 women who sacrificed their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan wars. These women have proven that the female sex can contribute momentously to our nation's military strength and success. However, placing them specifically in direct combat situations is not wise. Physical differences cannot be ignored, and neither can issues of cohesion, realities of combat missions, the epidemic of internal harassment and rape, involuntary transfer, potential draft, economic drawbacks, and the trending compromise of standards. On the surface, requiring women to serve in these positions is an expression of social equality, but at its core, the issue is far from social. In order to maintain its current prestige, efficiency, budget, and strength, the U.S. military must reverse this dangerous policy change. Supporters of this change in policy like to approach the argument with a sense of humor. Obviously, women are the victims of Colonel Misogyny and his ruthless band of old-fashioned insensitive cronies who fight to keep women barefoot pregnant in the kitchen, right? Wrong. This stigma has been carefully wielded to condition the public's opinion to favor a false sense of equal opportunity and appeal to the American citizen's thirst for injustice. But we're beginning to lose sight of reality in our ideological quest for gender equality. American women are not staying home barefoot pregnant or in the kitchen. They're coming home in body bags. They've been the subject of decades of research, which has proven a simple truth. Women are physically different than men. A process called gender norming resulted in a double standard within our nation's military academies. A USMA report on the integration and performance of women at West Point revealed some alarming effects of gender norms among female candidates. For example, a woman in the Navy may complete 11% fewer sit-ups, 53% fewer push-ups, and run 1.5 miles less at a pace 27% slower than her male competitors. Furthermore, women are far more susceptible to injury and hospitalization. Time magazine reports that even once pregnancy and delivery hospitalizations are removed from the equation, female troops are hospitalized at a rate 30% higher than their male counterpoints. Military women also incur stress fractures at double the rate of their male colleagues. They're also 50% more likely to visit walk-in clinics. British Major Judith Webb served in combat after Great Britain's decision to include women in infantry forces. She had previously supported the decision, but concluded that, "I am not physically the woman I once was, and my views have greatly changed on the possibility of women having successful, long careers while serving in the infantry." Many women in British forces share this view, as well as American female veterans who have experienced consequences such as sterility, which is common, or hip fractures, which are a direct result of sustained weight-bearing. Women, by nature, have wider-set hips than men and are far more prone to incurring these type of fractures, which one female soldier refers to as the death knell of their military career. This is especially problematic in the infantry, marine, special forces, or SEAL units, where troops do not return to base at the end of the day. In these units, soldiers are required to carry up to 127 pounds at all times. These units are small and tightly knit, having endured rigorous training together. The frequent transfer or recusal of women due to injury would mean constant readjustment despite already unimaginable physical and mental demands. The risk is simply not worth the gain. When we tell ourselves that in an ideal world men and women would fight together equally, we forget that in an ideal world men and women would not have to fight. Return for a moment to the previously mentioned situation. An infantry or special forces unit is required to survive isolated, under great physical stress in hostile enemy territory for weeks on end without returning to base. There are no separate facilities for women, no showers, no personal space, and constant danger. This is what it means to serve in combat. Ryan Smith was a Marine and infantryman who served in Iraq. He's now an attorney and writes about the reality of life in combat. His unit had spent weeks in a dark, crowded military vehicle packed together. So why are we making life in combat any harder than it has to be? Or any more humiliating? While some men and women in arms have been able to maintain professional, positive relationships in service, they have never been tested at this extreme, nor should they be. That said, professional relations have not always been the case. In the 1991 Gulf War, there was a particularly high percentage of women aboard two ships, the USS Acadia and the USS Yellowstone. In fact, nearly one-third of the crew on the Acadia were women. When they both returned, 36 women aboard the Acadia and 20 women aboard the Yellowstone were pregnant. That's nearly 1 in 10. The trend continued in 2007 in a study of a brigade serving in Iraq. Females were found to be 3 times as likely to be evacuated as men. And of those who were evacuated for medical issues, a shocking 74% were for pregnancy-related issues. In fact, the unplanned pregnancy rate in the military is some 50% higher than the general population. Even the most rigorous psychological conditioning cannot uproot sexual instincts. It is inevitable that men and women placed in close quarters for long periods of time will experience the sexual consequences of men and women placed in close quarters for long periods of time. In all of this information, there are 2 unpleasant realities to be considered. The first is that pregnancy by consent, planned or unplanned, is the byproduct of women in the armed forces. Imagine being a woman under the terrible conditions Ryan Smith described and having to handle an unplanned pregnancy. It would be nearly impossible and most likely fatal not only for the woman but also for her unborn child. Critics may debate the relevancy of the child's life issue, but a woman involuntarily transferred into direct combat is denied even the right to choose. The second issue is, of course, sexual harassment within the military. Americans would like to think that this kind of abuse is reserved for terrorists and enemies, but the U.S. military is not exempt from the various forms of sexual abuse found in every nation and army worldwide. The military thrives on refining and recruiting members with aggressiveness, strength, size, masculinity, and brutality, the vast majority of whom exemplify exceptional bravery and character. But like any other workplace in America, sexual harassment still exists. Consider, for instance, the lives of several female soldiers who fought in Iraq. Lieutenant General Ricardo Sanchez, a senior military commander, ordered that the deaths of these women be concealed to prevent public outcry. Their cause of death and gender were left out of all reports, but stand as a testament to the reality that women are more likely to be raped by fellow soldiers than by enemy soldiers, and more likely to experience the trauma of sexual abuse than enemy fire. These women in Iraq died of dehydration in their sleep because they did not want to visit the isolated latrines after dark for fear of being raped. Countless women are sexually assaulted and raped every day in the military at twice the rate of civilian society. The issue is largely concealed by the political effort to avoid crippling lawsuits and public mistrust, but the testimonies of women such as Tia Christopher, member of the Navy and Marine Corps, are shocking. Forced to sleep in the bed in which she was regularly raped by her commanding officer, Christopher eventually resorted to slitting her wrists and bleaching her sheets to destroy the evidence. Many women resort to drastic measures such as these in order to avoid dishonorable discharge, further abuse, or extended assignment. In many cases, the authority to whom they would report such a crime is the perpetrator himself. The military is not a career in which a person gets a lot of choice. It relies on obedience and subjugation. By forcing women into combat roles without acknowledging or fixing serious problems such as harassment, we subject them to further abuse. The sad irony is that many of the groups claiming to support women's rights, such as the Service Women's Action Network, fail to acknowledge the harm and violation which will undeniably result from this policy change. These groups demand civil rights, while neglecting the reality that nothing about war is civil. Military is the opposite of civil. We need not proliferate this issue of abuse by placing it under the magnifying glass that is direct combat. If, by chance, an apathetic, desensitized citizen bears no sympathy for the violation of women's rights, or no regard for the physical issues and standards of the force that protects him or her, he or she might at least wake up to an increase in taxes. That's right, it's time to pay up. The current administration, which claims to be working diligently to reduce the national deficit and reduce military spending, is about to add unforeseen and potentially debilitating charges to the already overdrawn national credit card. An increase in female enlistment will most certainly result in an increase in injury, evacuation, medical care, pregnancy, and discharge, especially in units where women barely meet the service requirement, or evade it through gender norming. This means more soldiers overall, and soldiers must be trained, at a price. Furthermore, the entire institution will be forced to drag its reputation through an onslaught of sexual harassment lawsuits and charges, as women wake up to the reality of direct combat. There remains still another question which the Pentagon must eventually answer, and that is the possibility of a draft. Now that women have unrestricted opportunity within the military, they will be assigned additional responsibility. Service within ground combat units, as is the case with all other military units, means the possibility of involuntary transfer. The military is not a major corporation or a liberal arts college. One cannot simply sign up for certain classes and avoid others. If the military were to truly extend the argument of equal treatment and opportunity, it would have to extend the draft to include women. Needless to say, this would be a crippling mistake. Many women in the armed forces viewed what Panetta referred to as a ban as a protection. Aware of the dangers and realities of direct combat, 90% of currently enlisted women opposed the change in policy. And yet somehow the vocal 10% joined forces with an ill-informed, idealistic public and a politically motivated Pentagon to ignore these 9 out of 10 women. It's time we start listening to their concerns. Several years ago, a few large cities throughout the nation lowered their standards for firefighting to accommodate more women. Rather than strengthening the force, it led to a greater number of underqualified males and females who are not well equipped to perform their duties, saving lives. As a result, lives were lost, people were injured, and more money was spent. It would be a shame to see the same thing happen to the U.S. military. We cannot fall victim to the fallacy that we are holding women back by placing restrictions on special combat units. Women are equal, even superior to men in nearly every career field. The Secretary of State is a woman. We'll likely have a female commander-in-chief within the next decade. But that is because women are capable and competitive leaders who elevate our nation's standards. In combat, the strongest, most capable woman cannot begin to compete with the strongest, most capable male. Moreover, she becomes a victim of harassment and injury, and a disruption to the effectiveness of these special forces. America is a nation that promotes progress through excellence, not mediocrity. It is a nation that strives to protect women's opinions and rights, rather than ignoring or abusing them. If we desire to maintain these standards of excellence and equality, we must maintain a military that is effective, efficient, and as cohesive as possible. It is our duty as citizens to inform ourselves of the brutal reality of this policy change, as well as its impending dangers. Only a complete reversal of this ill-informed public opinion will allow for the reversal of a decision that can do nothing but damage one of America's strongest, most effective institutions, the United States military.